Once upon a time in the days of the pharaohs, there was a very powerful pharaoh named Akhenaten. He ruled over Egypt with an iron fist. He had vast wealth and unimaginable powers, and people loved him dearly. However, he had one big problem. Even though he was young and very much capable of having children, he didn't have any. The pharaoh wanted to have someone to pass his throne to. But since he didn't have any sons, every night he dreamed of what it would be like to have a son. One day, while the pharaoh was taking a leisurely stroll around his gardens, he came across a beautiful woman sitting on a bench. Her name was Nefertiti, and she was the most beautiful woman the pharaoh had ever seen. He immediately fell in love with her and asked her to marry him. She accepted, and soon after, they were wed. However, despite their passionate love for each other, they also did not have any children. One day, the pharaoh went to see the oracle of Delphi to ask why he wasn't having any children. The oracle told him that in order to have a son, he needed to make a sacrifice to the gods. The pharaoh was devastated to hear this, but he was willing to do anything to have a child. So he asked the oracle what he needed to do. The oracle told him that he needed to sacrifice the most precious thing he owned. The pharaoh thought long and hard about this, and eventually he decided that the most precious thing he owned was his throne. So the pharaoh went home and told Nefertiti that he was going to sacrifice his throne to the gods so that they would bless him with a son. She was deeply disappointed to hear this, as she knew that if he sacrificed his throne, he would no longer be the pharaoh. However, she knew that he was doing this for their love, so she didn't say anything. The next day, the pharaoh went to the temple and made the sacrifice. To his surprise, the gods did not bless him with a son, but instead they gave him a beautiful puppy. He was furious, feeling betrayed by the gods. He never forgot the disrespect they had shown him. He ordered his guards to take the puppy away and throw it in the river. As the guards were taking the puppy away, one of them couldn't bear to see such a cute and innocent creature being thrown into the river to die. So he took the puppy home and raised it as his own. He named the dog Amhatb, which means, "My dog is precious." Amhatb grew up to be a very smart and loyal dog. He was also very protective of his adopted father and would do anything to keep him safe. As Amhatb grew older, so did the pharaoh. And as the pharaoh aged, he became more and more bitter. He started to believe that the gods had cursed him, and that's why he would never have a son. He started to lash out at his people, taking out his frustration on them. He began to build up an army, preparing for a war he planned to wage on the gods themselves. He wanted to punish them for not giving him a son. Meanwhile, Amhatb had grown into a strong and brave dog. He could sense that his adopted father was becoming more and more unstable. He was worried that one day the pharaoh might actually start the war he had been threatening. One day, the pharaoh announced that he was going to lead his army to the oracle of Delphi to demand an explanation as to why he hadn't given him a son. Amhatb was worried that this would start a war between the pharaoh and the gods. So he decided to stop his father no matter the cost. When the pharaoh and his army arrived at the temple, Amhatb followed them in secret. He listened intently as the pharaoh demanded answers from the oracle. The oracle told the pharaoh that he had made a mistake when he sacrificed his throne. He should have sacrificed something else that was precious to him. The pharaoh was furious, but he knew that the oracle was right. He had made a mistake. He had sacrificed his throne out of anger and hatred for the gods, and that's why they had punished him. As the pharaoh was leaving the temple, Amhatb approached him and licked his hand. The pharaoh looked down at the dog and realized who it was. He remembered the dog that the oracle had given him as a gift, and how his guard had disobeyed him and kept the dog instead of throwing it in the river. The pharaoh was overcome with emotion as he realized that this dog had saved his life. If the dog hadn't stopped him, he would have started a war with the gods and most likely died. The pharaoh knelt down and petted the dog, thanking him for saving his life. From that day on, the pharaoh was a changed man. He became kind and compassionate once again. He treated his people well and ruled over Egypt with wisdom and fairness. And Amhotep lived out the remainder of his days in the palace, where he was loved and respected by everyone. The story of Amhotep, the dog who saved his pharaoh, became a legend in Egypt. It was passed down from pharaoh to pharaoh and from generation to generation. And to this day, Egyptians remember the bravery and loyalty of Amhotep, the dog who saved his pharaoh. Now let's move on to the next story. There once was a poor woodcutter who lived deep within a dark and gloomy forest. The woodcutter was a kind and honest man, but he was very poor and struggled to make ends meet. One day, while chopping wood, the woodcutter came across a clearing he had never seen before. In the middle of the clearing stood a huge and ancient oak tree. The woodcutter had never seen such a magnificent tree before, and he decided to chop it down. As he swung his axe towards the tree, a booming voice echoed through the forest. "Whoever chops down my tree shall become the ruler of these lands." The woodcutter was startled, but he was also very ambitious. He thought to himself, "Why not me?" So he continued to chop the tree until it finally fell. As the tree crashed to the ground, the woodcutter felt a surge of power coursing through his veins. He had become the ruler of the forest. The woodcutter immediately set about making changes. He built a small cottage for the animals and filled it with food and water. He planted trees and flowers all around the forest and made sure that everyone living there was happy and healthy. The animals in the forest were so grateful for the woodcutter's kindness that they declared him their king. They elected him as their leader and promised to do whatever he wanted. From that day on, the woodcutter and the animals lived together in harmony. They were friends and equals, and they worked together to make the forest a better place for everyone. The woodcutter's story is a reminder that sometimes the greatest power comes from the smallest of beginnings. With a little bit of kindness and a lot of heart, anyone can make a difference in the world. And that's the end of today's stories. I hope you enjoyed listening to them as much as I enjoyed bringing them to you. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay curious and keep an open mind, because you never know what kind of magic you might find.
لا تنسوا الإعجاب بالفيديو والاشتراك في القناة تشجيعا لنا لنستمر بنشر المزيد. لا تنسوا الإعجاب بالفيديو والاشتراك في القناة تشجيعا لنا لنستمر بنشر المزيد. لا تنسوا الإعجاب بالفيديو والاشتراك في القناة تشجيعا لنا لنستمر بنشر المزيد. لا تنسوا الإعجاب بالفيديو والاشتراك في القناة تشجيعا لنا لنستمر بنشر المزيد